Ex-footballer and fried potato salesman Gary Lineker is nakedly using his platform to influence the political debate in this country. Well, forgive me if I do the same. Saint Gary, the spiritual leader of the Be Kind cult and a professionally nice human being, is now openly mocking his BBC employers with a signed letter condemning the Rwanda plan to process migration claims abroad. That must have taken a huge effort, mustn't it, signing a letter? Where does he get the time or energy? I do hope he took the rest of the day off. But I'll be honest, Gary Lineker's ongoing pronouncements, even though he's effectively a civil servant in the employ of the national state broadcaster, these pronouncements do all of us a big favour, because it shows the true colours of the media and political elite in this country. I see no appetite from Gary Lineker or others to bring the illegal migrant crossings down to zero, a figure I suggested in yesterday's Big Opinion. Perhaps that's because Gary is insulated from the consequences of his virtue signalling. I doubt Gary lives near a migrant hotel. I doubt he struggles to get a GP appointment or a school place for his kids. Now, of course, as an individual, he's entitled to his view. But to work for the BBC requires due impartiality. The incoming BBC chairman has suggested that Gary's recent activities have been in breach of BBC guidelines. But Gary doesn't care. Just as he used to run rings around defences as a top footballer, he's now running rings around his own employers. His posturing would not be an issue if he worked for ITV or Sky, just as I'm allowed an opinion here. But as one of the faces of our state broadcaster, funded by an effective tax on the British people and punishable by jail if not paid, Gary Lineker is doing untold damage to the reputation of the BBC. The Mail newspaper report that many of Gary's colleagues are completely fed up with his relentless campaign. One employee speaking to the paper said that Gary is tweaking the tale all the time. People are frustrated and feel as if they've been through it all before. They're saying it makes us look daft when everyone else is obeying the rules. I don't think Gary Lineker cares about the BBC. I think he cares about Gary Lineker. And let's be honest, it's been a tough couple of weeks for the Beeb, with the organisation handed a lower-than-expected licence fee rise and with public anger and disbelief at the axing of A Question of Sport, a programme that used to be brilliant and watched by millions when it was hosted by Sue Barker, who the organisation, obsessed with younger viewers, presumably thought was over the hill. More evidence that the organisation couldn't give two figs about the largest part of its audience, older viewers and listeners. I say, bring Sue back. Bring her back. So, Lineker is damaging the BBC, and the amount of damage is unquantifiable. How did the 300,000 Jewish people living in this country who also pay the licence fee feel when he effectively compared the horrors of the Holocaust with the government's Rwanda plan? He talked about 1930s Germany, thus trivialising the worst act of murderous human cruelty in history. And how did Jewish people feel just a couple of months later when he stayed so silent on actual Nazism in the aftermath of the Hamas attack on Israel on October the 7th? In the end, it's my view that Gary Lineker was a talented footballer and is a gifted and charismatic sports host. But it's also my view that he's a preening narcissist whose every pronouncement is there to perpetuate the myth that he's a wonderful human being. The brilliant journalist Carol Malone begs to differ and has described Gary Lineker as a dangerous man. That's very strong language, but she may have a point, because the ideas that he's peddling would ultimately be damaging to the country. The BBC is there to unite the nation, so its biggest stars should not be dividing it. The truth is, I was always taught that you judge a person by their actions, not their words. And Lineker's Mr. Nice Guy image doesn't stand up to scrutiny. This is a man who sells junk food to kids. Crisps are delicious, but they're not good for you, especially youngsters. He presumably would like the government to spend more money on public services, given that he's identifiably on the political left. And yet, he's successfully battled HMRC in court to reduce his tax bill by millions. Just think how many school teachers or nurses that would pay for, or how much refugee accommodation that would provide. He's bigged up LGBTQ+ rights whilst broadcasting in Qatar, where being gay is illegal. He's worried about the environment, but happily fronts a football tournament in the burningly hot desert, where air-conditioned skyscrapers guzzle the Earth's resources faster than you can say net zero. Whatever his worldview is, rest assured Gary Lineker won't be impacted as he tweets from the luxury of his London mansion. He might have the money, but the rest of Britain can't afford Gary's luxury opinions. Gary Lineker is no mastermind. In fact, this pointless celebrity is now the BBC's weakest link.